Hello everyone, Jacob here. Today we're going to be talking about this structure, as much as, which in Korean of course translates to 뭐뭐뭐만큼. Alright, and we use this structure to talk about how two things are equal, or unequal in some way. How two things are equal or unequal in some way. And I know that a lot of Korean people really struggle with this structure because although it kind of seems simple, it's actually very complex and very complicated. And there's a lot of different kind of subtle things that you need to know when you're using this structure. So let's go ahead and get started. It's going to be kind of a long lesson, so just bear with me. So let's look at the first way to use this structure. Subject, verb, object, as much as, subject, verb, object, as much as, plus another full sentence, okay? So let's go ahead and get right into our examples. I study English. I study English as much as Jacob studies Korean. I often tell my students that they should at least study English as much as I study Korean. So if you can say this, I study English as much as Jacob studies Korean, then I think you're studying pretty well. Not as much as you should probably be, but at least you're studying as much as me, as much as I study Korean. So what does this mean? Basically it means that your studying English is equal to my studying Korean, kind of the amount, or not the amount, but how often you study English is equal to how often I study Korean, okay? So again, this is just to talk about how two things are equal. And again, if you look at the structure, you have a full sentence, as much as, plus another full sentence, okay? And this is actually a little bit of a complicated sentence to start with, because often we just kind of use it like this. We say subject, verb, object, as much as, plus a noun, or an ing verb, okay? And I would actually say that this is probably the most common way to use this structure, just by having a full sentence, as much as, and then a noun or an ing verb. And let's go ahead and look at two examples for this structure. So our first example would be Americans don't eat sweet potatoes. Americans don't eat sweet potatoes as much as Koreans. I think this is very true. What are sweet potatoes? Goguma, okay? And I think Koreans really like sweet potatoes. Ever since I've been in Korea, I just realized that, Koreans really like to just kind of eat sweet potatoes as a snack. You put it on your pizza, you put it in cakes. It's pretty crazy, actually. And Americans don't really eat sweet potatoes like this. They don't eat sweet potatoes as much as Koreans, or in as many ways as Koreans. So again, let's look at this. Let's look at this sentence. Americans don't eat sweet potatoes. Here we have a full sentence, right? As much as, and then we have Koreans, which is a noun. All right. So here, this is a noun. Koreans. And what does this mean? Again, it just means that kind of Americans eating sweet potatoes is not equal to Koreans eating sweet potatoes. Koreans eat sweet potatoes more in this case, all right? It's unequal. All right, let's go ahead and look at our second example, and I'll show you how to use it with an ing verb. I like reading as much as watching. I like reading as much as watching movies. Okay, I like reading as much as watching movies. So here again, we have a full sentence. I like reading as much as, and then an ing verb, watching, and then movies. All right. So here, what are we saying? That kind of my interest in reading is equal to my interest in watching movies, which actually isn't true. I prefer watching movies. But for today, let's just say that I like reading as much as watching movies. Okay, so now we've seen these two sentences, but actually, if you look carefully, these sentences are a bit different. Why? In the first sentence, what are we comparing? We are comparing Americans and Koreans, right? We are comparing Americans and Koreans. But in the second sentence, what are we comparing? We're comparing reading and watching movies. Okay, so you have to be careful just because here, what does this mean? If I make this sentence even longer, if I kind of follow this structure right here, what would this sentence be like? It would be, Americans don't eat sweet potatoes as much as Koreans eat sweet potatoes. All right, so Koreans here is actually the subject of, you know, this next sentence, which is kind of just shortened in this case. And here, what about in this one? I like reading as much as I like watching movies. So in this case, watching movies is actually the object of kind of this sentence that's kind of omitted. It's shorter. So this structure right here is actually the same as this one, but we're omitting kind of the last part. And it could either be the subject and the verb, or the verb and the object. Okay? So actually, I kind of mixed those up. This one, in this first sentence, we're omitting the verb and the object. We're leaving it out, so I'm going to put it in parentheses. In this sentence, we are omitting the subject and the verb. Okay, but the structure is basically the same as this one. All right. So this is kind of the most basic way to use it, but there are other ways to use this as much as structure. You can use it with an adjective. All right, so let's go down and let's see how we can use it with an adjective. You can say, to be as adjective, to be as adjective as mama. Okay, so this is very important to remember this structure. This is another way that it's used a lot. And let's look at an example real quick. Hyuna is as beautiful as Lee-hyori. Alright, if you've watched some of the other videos in the past, you'll probably know that actually I think Hyuna is more beautiful. But again, today let's just say that Hyuna is as beautiful as Lee-hyori, that they're equal. Okay? It's not true. Hyuna is way more beautiful. Anyway, let's move on and let's look at how to use this as much as or as adjective as with an adverb. With an adverb, you want to use it like this. To verb as adverb as mama. Okay, so let's look at an example. Lions run as fast as tigers. Lions run as fast as tigers. Okay? So again, here we're talking about how lions and tigers are equal when it comes to running. Both run just as fast as each other. Okay? Which I think is true. I think lions and tigers run as fast as each other. Right? So this is how you want to use it with an adverb. Always as, adverb as. With an adjective, as, adjective as. And I'm going to go ahead and put up a warning already because I hear a lot of mistakes when Korean people are trying to use this. A lot of Korean people say adjective as much as. Okay? A lot of Korean people say adjective as much as or adverb as much as, which is wrong. Okay? Please don't say this. It's bad, and I'm going to cross it out. Don't say it. Adjective as much as or adverb as much as. This is wrong. Don't say Hyuna is beautiful as much as Lee-hyori. All right, it just sounds bad. It's not right. It's wrong. Don't say lions run fast as much as tigers. Okay, this also is wrong. It sounds bad. You got to watch out. Just don't do it. Okay, and in fact I might even make a separate video about this in the 흔히 하는 실수 section because I hear this so much and it really bothers me. So don't do it. Now you know, so you don't have to do it anymore. All right, now let's move on and let's look at another way to use this structure. Let's go down and let's look at another way to use this structure. You can say to verb as much or many, noun as mama. Okay, so this looks kind of complicated, so I'm just going to go ahead and give you an example right now. And in fact, I'm going to use the same example as I used before, only slightly different, a little bit differently. Americans don't eat as many sweet potatoes. Americans don't eat as many sweet potatoes as Koreans. So if we go back up, we will see a very similar example. Let's go back up. It says right here, Americans don't eat sweet potatoes as much as Koreans. So here we have the noun before, and down here we have the noun kind of in between, in the middle, right? So actually, I'm just going to go ahead and rewrite the example that's above, just so that we have them both together. And then I'll kind of explain how these are different. So the example from before was Americans don't eat sweet potatoes. Americans don't eat sweet potatoes as much as Koreans. Okay, now I'm sure to you these look very similar, because here we have a noun in the middle, but here actually the noun is before. Okay, so this one, it's as many noun as, this one is noun as much as. How are these different? In this sentence, we're talking about the amount of sweet potatoes. Okay, so let's say Koreans eat 10 million sweet potatoes every year. They eat 10 million sweet potatoes, which is a lot of sweet potatoes. And Americans only eat 1 million sweet potatoes. Then if you want to really stress kind of the amount like this, then you would want to say this sentence: Americans don't eat as many sweet potatoes as Koreans. Okay? But in this sentence, we're not really talking about the amount. That's not really the meaning that I get from this sentence. In this sentence, we're talking about how often. Okay, how often Americans eat sweet potatoes, as opposed to how often Koreans eat sweet potatoes. So let's say Koreans eat sweet potatoes once a week. Americans eat sweet potatoes once a month. Well then, in that case, you would want to say this: Americans don't eat sweet potatoes as much as Koreans. And actually, in this sentence, you could even change it. You could just say, Americans don't eat sweet potatoes as often as Koreans. And it's pretty much the same meaning. All right. So again, if you're following this structure right here, it's really to stress the amount. Whereas if you're following the structure from before, where you have a full sentence and then as much as and then a noun, then really what you're going to the meaning that you're going to be giving is talking about how often, or you could say the degree to which Americans and Koreans eat sweet potatoes. All right, and this is extremely important, and I'm going to tell you why. So let's go down and I will explain why this is so important. And I'm going to put another warning sign, because you have to be careful. You have to kind of understand this concept and use it correctly. Sometimes you want to really only talk about amount, and sometimes you really only want to talk about how often or the degree. So I'm going to give you a couple of sentences and kind of just to show that. So what are our sentences? I make as much money. I make as much money as you. I make as much money as you. So again, here we're putting the noun in between. We're saying as much noun as. Okay? Here the noun goes in between. And what is this stressing? We're stressing, again, amount, right? Why do we want to stress amount? Because we're talking about money. When you talk about money, you usually want to stress the amount. You don't talk about how often you make money, right? You don't say, I make money once a month. This just sounds weird. So in this kind of sentence, if you said, I make money as much as you, it would sound weird. You have to say, I make as much money as you. All right? And I'm going to show you another sentence where kind of the opposite case is true. I study Korean as much as you. So again, here we're talking about what? How often, or if you want, kind of the degree to which you study Korean. Okay, how often, basically. Why? Why do we want to follow this structure? Subject, verb, object, as much as, plus a noun. We're putting the noun actually before, right? You can't say I study as much Korean as you, because we don't talk about kind of the amount of Korean that you study. You talk about how often you study Korean. All right, so I really wanted you to kind of understand that point. I've actually kind of mentioned this in another video when we were talking about the more. There's kind of a similar thing. There's a kind of a similar concept, and so it's actually the same. So if you haven't watched that video, I recommend watching it, and you'll realize that actually it's quite similar. All right, so that's actually all I want to talk about today. In the next lesson, I'm going to continue talking about as much as, and I'm going to kind of talk about some more ways to use this very complex but very, very practical, very, very useful structure. All right, so I hope you understood. I hope you enjoyed the lesson, and I'll see you next time.